And action! Okay, so Nell had a question about the ketogenic diet, and I'll try to summarize this. As I always tell people, and I think I tell it in my videos too, the objective of any nutritional change is for it to make an impact, for it to not do any damage, and for it to be sustainable. So I really don't care what my patients do. In fact, every patient is different. That's why I try to get people in. When I get them in, I try to reverse engineer where the problem started, maybe the decades before the problem started, and try to get to that time of life again. So the objective is always to live or feel like you were back in your 20s. And that doesn't mean you have to look like that, just have to feel that way. Energetic, good sleep, good sex, decent appetite, and good problem solving. So I guess the ketogenic diet is, if you break it down into the three components of the average human diet, it always is involving macronutrients that are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Those are the macronutrients. And you have to have macronutrients to survive. That's just the way mitochondria and cellular respiration works in humans. So sometimes you'll see certain diets manipulate the three components or the timing of the three components to get a desired effect, and the desired effect will be weight loss. So I always say that when it comes to nutrition change, I don't care what you do as long as you get some help, whether it's from me or one of the registered dietitians in the field, one of the life coaches in the field, one of the health coaches in the field, somebody with authority, because I think you have to be, you have to answer to someone. If you don't, it's too easy to fall off the wagon, especially when you crash. So I guess this will be where I talk about the ketogenic diet or ketogenic diet. So of the three macronutrients I just mentioned, the ketosis diet or the ketogenic diet, it's actually very old. And if you look probably on YouTube or on some literature with National Institute of Health, you'll see the information that came out about 20 years ago on the use of the ketogenic diet for epilepsy. So it was found that, I have to review and find out which studies helped or showed that it was valuable, but it was found that if you went really low on your macronutrient called carbohydrate, and you went high on the fats and a little bit higher on the protein, you would be able to avoid the seizure, many of the seizure medicines and many episodes of seizure, because you're going into a state of ketosis. So ketosis, if you have ever heard of, diabetics have to worry about metabolic acidosis or something where their blood sugars become drastically high. They can't digest or can't get the energy out of their food products. And even though they have a lot of sugar floating around in their bloodstream, it doesn't get into the cells, so they wind up digesting fats and proteins, which is not really all that healthy. But in the short run, they feel bad, they feel lousy. But after the alternative fuel sources start to get eaten up, the fats and the proteins, then you can actually live without, the theory is you can live without the carbohydrates. There are proponents of the Atkins diet, the South Beach diet, the paleo diet in respects that try to do that. High fat, high protein, low carbohydrate. So of the three macronutrients, low carbs, high fats, high proteins. With the ketogenic diet or ketogenic diet, really high fats and moderate proteins. So the idea would be, again, you don't have so many carbs. Theoretically, there's so many crappy carbs out there, there's so many variables with carbohydrates that if you just stick with fats and proteins, it might be a no-brainer to attack that. And I've seen some of the blogs out there saying that you can have eggs and butter and hamburgers, beef, everything that's fatty, salmon, and that is kind of true, but it does work with some people. But the problem is, in that first 2 weeks when you go off, when you start the diet, you can feel really bad, and if you haven't been checked for diabetes, it can actually put you into a metabolic acidosis, which is not healthy. Sometimes it's termed diabetic ketoacidosis, but whatever you hear it as, if you're undiagnosed, get a checkup first, get some basic blood tests, and then go on your way. So whether you do it on your own, which I don't suggest, or you do it with somebody that kind of gives you eyes on in the field to help you, advise you, help you get past that stick point, I'd say do that. It makes it more sustainable. And that brings me to my next point. If you're going to be on the ketogenic diet, you have to, because it's a drastic change around, you have to plan properly. It's Sunday, I'm late, it's 8 o'clock on Sunday night. I went to the Jewel Asco to get my 5 days prep food for the week, a little late, but it's done. So I have all my stuff in the fridge in the office, and I'm going to go back home with my salads and a couple other things, but I'm cool. So I prep every Sunday for the rest of the week. For the ketogenic diet, if you're going to embark on this kind of change, you really should be prepping for the 4 weeks that you're going to dive into this thing, because when you don't have carbohydrates and you're used to them, that source of fuel burning, when it's turned off, your body has to start up a little bit of this other one. It has to crank the engine for the fats and the protein fuel engine. So it takes a little bit of time before one turns off and the other turns on, and you get used to it. You might smell funny, you might feel crappy, you might have problems with headaches, body aches, you'll hit the wall if you're an athlete, so you got to be prepared for that. Some people call it a Herxheimer reaction. Whatever you call it, you'll hit the wall because you're switching fuel sources. But when you do, if you haven't been checked out, as I mentioned earlier, for medical problems, it can put you into the hospital. So please get checked out first. As I was alluding to, you have to be accountable to somebody. So get a coach that you can bounce questions off of and get some guidance. If you get to the 4-week mark, cool. Add another 2 to 4 more weeks, and hopefully you'll lose a lot of weight. There's a lot of information that says when you start to burn carbohydrates or you use up your carbohydrate source, you lose a lot of water with that. And it makes sense. Usually the first of any diet, truthfully, when you cut back on the bad carbohydrates, the simple sugars, you usually lose about 5 pounds, if you're lucky, 10 pounds, and that could be a combination of your glycogen storage, your little bit of water, and that's about it. But the other thing that you have to be careful of is that after you've finished either the 4-week or the 8-week block, at the most maybe 12 weeks, my suggestion is you start planning for what to do after that. That's a little more sustainable. There's variations to the ketogenic diet. If you're an athlete, there's the ketogenic diet where you allow carbohydrates in for times when you're working out because you need a fast burning fuel source. There's also intermittent ketogenic diet. There's also a high protein ketogenic diet. I might take that back. I think it might be, well, there's variations to that. So whether you do the pure ketogenic or the variable, the hybrid ketogenics, whatever you choose, read on it first, please. Don't just follow somebody's vlog like mine. Try to have all your ammunition ready for the fight. And again, you're going to have to prep. I prep every Sunday for the rest of the week. You're going to have to prep the beginning of the month for the rest of the month. You have to prep about what to do when you crash. If you have vacation time, sick leave, I would probably plan on taking it for the first 7 days or right after the first 7 days, because that's when most people get the headaches and withdrawal from carbohydrates. Carbohydrates cause a little bit of an addiction. It's not the carbohydrate, it's the body's reaction to it. So you might have a withdrawal state, again, call that Herxheimer reaction. If you feel achy, headachy, sick, flu-like symptoms, stay home. Get some rest, try not to push too hard. You'll also be irritable, and you will smell a little bit. There's an odor that's released when you go into a ketosis state. If you've ever had a diabetic that's kind of dehydrated going into DKA, you'll get used to that smell. It's not a bad smell, it's a fruity smell. I forgot the Latin name for it, but see how aggressive this is? Now, interesting to note that I mentioned something earlier about the thrifty gene. Thrifty genes have been thought to make people gain weight. Certain populations, the Inuit, the Pima Indians, I think Ashkenazi Jews, have this thrifty gene that makes them hold on to weight. It's theorized that when those cultures went into starvation certain years, they would have to survive by being able to take the little that they would eat and store it aggressively fast. So unfortunately, if you have that thrifty gene, we're not in famine, we're not starving. In fact, there's a lot of simple carbohydrates and a lot of sugars that are out there. So if you happen to be indulging in more than usual and you have the thrifty gene turn on, for whatever reason it turns on, probably stress, fight or flight, starvation, then you're going to start grabbing all the calories out of everything, extracting very good, and you're going to put on the weight fast. So what I was saying is that sometimes if you look at Eskimos, the Inuit, they eat mostly fat and protein. They don't have carbohydrate sources, grains, vegetables, fruits, very little because of the frozen tundra. So because most of their diet is composed of flesh and fat, they are on a ketotic diet. And if you look at some of the simple studies on the Inuit, the Eskimos, they don't have an overabundance of ammonia in their urine sources or in their blood. They don't go ketotic. If you give them carbohydrates, they don't become heavy. Well, I don't know about that, but they don't have the reaction that some of us have by switching the furnaces to high or to insulin resistance, and they survive. So that's one culture that can do it and survive and not have any big problems. I don't know if I have to read on other studies that have been done on that population, or maybe the Pima Indians like I mentioned, but most of us in Illinois or in the Midwest are not built that way. In fact, you'll find that what we do here, the standard American diet, is totally opposite. And that's why I'd always say it's important to, you're going to be surrounded by that after your ketotic diet, or after your attempt in the first 2 weeks, or after your 12-week stay in the ketotic practice, but you have to have the next thing to dovetail onto. And if you look at the Mediterranean diet, hands down has been the one that has been studied most. Walter Willett out of Harvard had been one of the first ones to put together the food pyramid. And you always have to have something healthy to gravitate to afterward. So in my experience, I have very few patients that can maintain a liquid diet, the ketotic diet, for a long time. The paleo, I've seen a couple patients in my experience kind of slipping through and still maintaining paleo and being happy with it, and I think that's fine. That's why I say whatever works, that's cool. But please come to me or go to your doctor to make sure that your targets are being hit, that you're not getting sick, not feeling sick, but not getting sick on blood testing, because there are some problems that exist when you make massive change. I think truthfully, the end result is, as a society, Americans have to lose weight. As a society, Americans have to move more, 3 days a week, 30 minutes at a time, moderate to intense activity. As a society, we all have to practice some form of mindful practice. And it's said that even mindfulness will help you lose weight too, especially if all we're doing is eating for fight or flight. And I don't mean eating because we're getting ready for a fight or a fist fight. I mean eating because the average American is involved with a little stressful reaction every couple minutes of an 8-hour shift. So if you constantly have the fight or flight initiative turned on, you're going to be seeking food at some point in time. Usually it's the end of the day. In fact, when I went to go do my shopping for the week, I had a patient that I saw in the Jewel Osco, and she just got off work. It's Sunday now, and she just got off work. It's, like I said, 7, 8 o'clock. She is hungry, but actually she's doing pretty well. But you know, that's the problem with again, the stress or fight or flight thing, is that we have to pay the bills. We have to work the shifts that we work, but you have to be mindful about what you're going to do when you eat during those times of work or famine, what you're going to do after you get home. Right now the Grammys are on, and I'd love to watch and just sit down on a couch and eat crappy food, but I can't because I got to work tomorrow, Monday. So just be prepared. Get somebody that you can answer to, or you can be accountable to, you can bounce questions off of. Read, please, just read. I want you to investigate and know the ins and outs. If you pick up a book, try to read it cover to cover. It's important to know the nuances of your diet, and then by all means, have the next step planned so that you can dovetail right into some other new activity or some other new nutritional practice that'll take you to the next summit that you're going to hit. So good question, Nell.